Hello and welcome to my channel, Lily Makes Stuff. Today I'm going to show you how to make the winter wrap cardigan. Just like my last two projects, the Sierra Sage sweater and the getaway dress, this is also going to be a not traditional design or pattern. I use measurements to help teach you how to make this cardigan. So which theoretically should make it possible for you to use pretty much any yarn, and you could be any size and customize it to fit you specifically. I have not tested this theory, so if anybody is using different yarn, like this, the yarn that I used is a bulky weight. So if you use like a worsted weight or a different weight yarn with this project or anything different, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. If this style of directions appeals to you, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. I do have some patterns that do follow more traditional lines too, so you can subscribe to my channel for that as well. But I do know that I'm already planning several more projects using this not traditional directions and using your measurements to show you how to make stuff. So let's go over the materials that I used. Because this is not a traditional type pattern and we use measurements, your specific measurements, you don't necessarily have to use this exact yarn, but it is Payton's alpaca blend. The color is Baltic and it's bulky, and it calls for a 6mm hook, which is what I used, and I used about 10 skeins of it. And then stitch markers are nice. You don't have to use these plastic stitch markers. You could just cut off a piece of yarn and use that as a stitch marker. And then measuring tape is pretty critical. Definitely going to need measuring tape, since that is how the directions go, is using your measurements. Scissors, tapestry needle. You will need 2 buttons, or I actually did 1 button and then I did a shawl pin, but you don't have to have a shawl pin. You can use 2 buttons, and they don't have to be the buttons with the larger holes. You can use just a regular button, but you'd have to use regular thread at that point. So again, if you're in a different country, you don't have access to this yarn, you should be able to use any bulky weight yarn, or honestly, you should be able to use any size yarn. But again, it's theory. I have not tested that. If you do use a different weight yarn, again, would love to hear about it. Okay, let's get started. Okay, to start the back panel, I will tell you what measurements you need to have first. Barbie's gonna be my Vanna. She's gonna help me out. First, you're going to need to know measurement A, which is going to be the width of the back panel. And the way you do that is you're going to measure all the way around the widest part of your hips. So not just half, but all the way around. So for her, that's 5. Okay. And then you half that, so that would be 2.5. And then you add an inch, so that would be 3.5 inches is what your width of your back panel is going to be. So you measure all the way around, you take half of that, and then you add an inch. So for me, I was 40 inches. Half of that would be 20, and then I would add an inch. So my width of my back panel is 21 inches, okay? So measurement B is the length that you want your sweater. So you would measure from like where your collar would be down to where you want your sweater. So for me, it was mid-thigh. Okay, so I measured from here to there, and that is going to be your measurement B. You don't have to do any math with that one. And also, I did want to point out that Barbie and I kind of have the same issue. Our hips are wider than our bust, But if you have the opposite issue, where your bust is wider than your hips, I would use the circumference of your bust instead of the widest part of your hips. So same thing, if your bust was, 36 inches, 40 inches around, take half of it, 20, add an inch, 21. So that would be the widest part. This sweater is not meant to be real loose, but not like body contouring, not really, really tight, okay? So depending on which is wider, your hips or your bust, use whichever one is the widest. To start the back panel, grab a couple of stitch markers. And one thing I want to explain, when you do your chain, by the second and third row, it will probably expand a little bit. So just bear that in mind as you are doing your chain, the length that you need to do it. I know that with these patterns, I don't really have a gauge, and that's because everybody potentially could use different yarn, so it would be impossible to try and gauge it. But if you want to do kind of a modified gauge, just chain a few, measure it, and then do 3 rows and see how much it increases, and then that way you'll know what your initial chain measurement needs to be. But you need to get as close as you can to measurement A, okay? So let's say this was my measurement A. You're going to chain 2, because that's going to be our turning chain. And I'm going to put a stitch marker in this last stitch, because in this pattern we're using our turning chains as a stitch, okay? So we're going to be doing the herringbone double crochet. I know in the Sierra Sage sweater that I did, we did the herringbone half double crochet, but this is going to be the double, okay? So to do that, you yarn over, go in the 3rd chain from your hook, yarn over, pull through, and instead of stopping, you go through the 1st loop, okay? Yarn over, pull through the 2nd loop, yarn over, pull through the 3rd loop, okay? And that's a herringbone double crochet. And then you just work your way down your chain. I'll do that again. So you yarn over, go through, yarn over again, and instead of stopping, you pull all the way through the 1st loop, yarn over, pull through the 2nd loop, yarn over, and then pull through the last 2, okay? And that's the stitch we're going to be using through the whole pattern, except on the sleeves. We do different things on the sleeves, okay? So you reach the end of your row, okay? You're going to chain 2, and like this is different than all the other patterns I've done. This chain 2 is going to count as a stitch, okay? So I like putting my stitch marker in before I turn, because it's easier to see where I need to go. And then you turn. So normally we would go in this 1st hole, but because this chain 2 counts as a stitch, we go into the 2nd hole, okay? So yarn over, pull through the 1st loop, 2nd loop, 3rd loop, okay? And for the back panel, we're only making 1, so you don't need to keep track of how many stitches you do across. But you know you've reached the end of your row when you reach your stitch marker, okay? You're going to do your last stitch into the chain 2 space. Okay, chain 2, and then I move up my stitch marker, and then turn, And you don't work into that first hole. You're going to work into the second one because this chain 2 counts as a stitch. Okay, and so you are going to repeat this until you have reached the length of measurement B. Okay, so here's my stitch marker, and I'm going to work my last stitch into the turning chain. And that stitch marker just helps me see where the hole is that I need to go in. Okay, so this width is measurement A, and this length is measurement B. Okay, and when you get done with making it as long as you want it to make, I would also mention this pattern doesn't work real well for a cropped sweater because it's a wrap. It kind of needs to be at least to your waist or longer. Okay, when you finish your back panel, you are going to fasten off. You cut your yarn and pull it through. I'll show you. So to fasten off, you're just gonna cut a decent length that you can weave in. And then I like to pull it through my hole. And that's it. Now we will start the front panels. For the front panel, you're gonna need to know these measurements. So measurement B is just the same as the back panel, just the length of the sweater, whatever you determined on the back panel, it's gonna be the same for the front panels, and you're gonna make 2 front panels. So for measurement C, it's gonna be from your shoulder to your neck. So where your sleeves would start to your neck, the edge of your neck. So for me, that was about 5 inches. Okay, and then measurement D is you take measurement A from the back panel, which for me was 21 inches, and then you subtract 1.5 inches. So that for me would be 19.5 inches, okay? So the front panels start out just like the back panels. I'm actually gonna be working from the top down. So normally this would be the bottom of your project, but this is actually going to be the top of our front panels. So you're going to chain however many you need to, bearing in mind that your work will grow a little bit as you go up in rows, okay? And I'm going to, when I get the number of chains that I want, then I'm going to add 2 for the turning chain. Stick my stitch marker in there. And then I'm going to work a herringbone double crochet into the 3rd stitch from the hook. So yarn over, pull through the first loop, yarn over, pull through the second loop, yarn over, and pull through the last 2. And work your way down. So on these front panels, after the first row, you are going to increase on one side every row. So on the first panel, we are going to increase on the opposite side of the tail. And then on the next panel, we will increase on the side with the tail. Okay, so here's our first row done of just herringbone double crochets. Okay, we're going to chain 2, put your stitch marker in there. Okay, we're going to increase on this side that's opposite your tail. Okay, and just like on the back panel, this chain 2 counts as your first stitch. So you're not going to work into the first hole, you're going to work into the second hole. And you go across until you reach your stitch marker, which will be the chain 2, the top of the chain 2 from the previous row. Okay, so here's my last stitch into the top of that chain 2. Okay, and this is the side that we're going to increase on, so instead of just putting 1 stitch in there, we're going to do 2 stitches. Okay, and now we're going to work back across, but again, we're going to increase on this side, not on this side. I'm going to move my stitch up, stitch marker up, and turn. And so normally, because this counts as a stitch, we would go into the second hole, but because we're going to increase, we're going to put another stitch in this hole. Okay, so that is our increase for the 3rd row. And you're going to work your way across, and when you get to the other side, you don't increase because that's the side with the tail. So every row you increase, but just on one side. And for this front panel, it's going to be opposite of where your tail is. Okay? And then I will show you how to start the other panel in just a minute. But you're going to increase every row until you get to measurement D. So when I got to 19 and a half inches, because that was measurement A minus 1.5 inches, I stopped increasing. Okay? So instead of doing 2 stitches on this side, I just worked even the same number of stitches back and forth. I quit increasing. Okay? So let me show you what that looks like. So here's my tail, and you can see this is the side that I did all my increases on. Okay? And when I got to 19 and a half inches, I stopped putting 2 stitches on this end. I did only 1 stitch and then continued that until I got to measurement B. Okay? And when you get to measurement B, you're going to fasten off. Okay? So to start the other side, you're going to do the same number of chains that you did for the other side. And then you're going to chain 2 more. I'm going to put stitch marker in here. And the first row, you just work straight across. You do a herringbone double crochet into the 3rd stitch from the hook. Work your way down. Okay, reach the end of your row, chain 2, put in your stitch marker, okay? And now this time, we're going to increase on the side that has the tail. So the other side, which we just did, this side had the tail, and we did the increases on the opposite side. Okay, so on this second row, if we weren't going to increase, we would go into this second hole, but because we're going to increase, we're going to go into the first hole, so that there are now 2 stitches in that first hole, okay? And it's on the side with the tail. So you're gonna work your way across again. And on row 3, not crocheting fast enough as I talk. Okay, here's my last stitch of row 2. Gonna chain 2 and advance your stitch marker, turn, and we're going to work into the second hole because we don't want to increase. So this counts as 1 stitch. And now on row 3, when we get back over to the side with the tail, we put 2 stitches in that last stitch because that's the side we want to increase on. And again, just like the other front panel, you're going to increase every row on one side until you get to measurement D, and then you stop increasing and you only put 1 stitch in. So here's the side we want to increase on the 3rd row. And because we want to increase, I'm putting 2 stitches in there. When you reach measurement D, you quit doing that. You only put in 1 stitch, okay? So that's how you make it opposite, okay? On this one, the increases are on the side with the tail. On this one, the increases, opposite the tail. On this side, the increases are on the side with the tail, okay? And the reason why that's important is because this design creates stripes, and at the end, we want our stripes to match, okay? So that's why that's important. Okay, when you get to, like I said, when you get to the end of your front panel, you're going to fasten off, and then we will start on the sleeves. So now for the sleeves, these are the measurements you're going to need to have. Measurement E is just the widest part of the upper arm. I'm not even going to measure, Barbie. It's going to be too small, but basically it's going to be somewhere in here. You know, for you, obviously it might be different. But yeah, just the widest, the circumference all the way around your arm, the widest part. Okay, and then for F, it's just going to be from your wrist, like where your you want your cuff to end, to where you want your shoulder seam is going to be. Okay, that's measurement F. And I know I didn't write on here, I should have, the circumference of your upper arm, so all the way around. Okay, so the sleeve is actually just one big giant ribbing, single crochet ribbing. It's meant to be like form-fitting around your arm, but if you want it a little looser, just add a couple more rows of ribbing. Okay, so I will show you real quick how to do the single crochet ribbing. Start out with a slip knot. And then chain however many you need to. I'm not gonna do like a whole sleeve's worth right here, just a few to help you understand how to do it. So you're gonna chain however many you need to, and then chain one more for your turning chain, okay? And then in the second stitch from your hook, you're gonna do a single crochet. So you go in, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and then pull through the 2 loops. And again, I would put a stitch marker, and you just work single crochets for the first row. The second row will be single crochets, but we're going to go in the back loop. And then every row after that, same thing, single crochets in the back loop, okay? So, and you want to keep track of how many stitches or chains that you did so that you can do the same for both sleeves, okay? And when you get to the end of the row, you're going to chain 1 and turn. And you're going to, unlike the rest of this pattern, we are going to go in the first stitch because that chain 1 does not count as a stitch. It's just our turning chain, okay? So almost going in the back loop. So here's where we would normally go in, but if you turn it, you can see the V here. Here's the front loop, and there's the back loop. So you go in the back loop only, pull up a loop, and go through your 2 stitches. So back loop, yarn over, pull through, go through your loops. And after your first stitch, you need to put a stitch marker. That'll help you not increase or decrease, because we do not want to do that with your sleeves, okay? So work your way down, single crochets in the back loop. You know you're got the right number of stitches when you come to your stitch marker, but it's never a bad idea to double check that you have the same number of stitches on the second row as you did the first row and every row after, okay? So our turning chain, chain 1, turn, doesn't count as a stitch, work into the back loop, a single crochet, and advance your stitch marker. Okay, and you're just going to repeat this single crochet in the back loop only until you get to measurement, what was it, E. Okay, so this length is going to be F. That's from your wrist to your shoulder, and the rows that you're going to make is the width, so that's measurement E. Okay, I'll show you on this one. So here's your sleeve, okay? So this is measurement E. This is measurement F, okay? And then when you get done, you're not going to fasten off like you did on the other ones. This time you're going to do an extra long length of yarn, because this is what we're going to use to sew it onto the rest of the sweater, okay? And I usually, when I'm doing that, I usually do triple the width that I need. So here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, and then you can cut your yarn and fasten off this big long length of yarn. Okay, so now you should have 5 pieces: your back panel, your 2 front panels, and your 2 sleeves. So now we're going to start putting stuff together. And the first thing we're going to put together is our shoulders. And like I said before, this pattern has stripes. It creates stripes. So we want to make sure that all of our stripes line up. So for the front two panels, your tails are going to should both be in the same direction, okay? And for the back panel, it should be opposite. So that when you stitch them together, your stripes line up. Okay, so right and wrong side, I kind of don't like using that terminology because there isn't really a right or a wrong side. It's just you want them all to be consistent. Okay, so if you have your front two panels where the tails are on the left, you want your back panel's tail to be opposite, so it would be on the right. So you decide. We just want all of our stripes, like I said, to line up. So what you're gonna do is cut, a length of yarn, triple, about this length. That's kind of the rule of thumb that I use. And we're going to use the mattress stitch. Okay, so you're going to need your yarn needle. You're going to thread that through. And then you're going to secure your corner edge, which I know this is not the corner. In making this video, or putting together this video, I discovered that the first time that I took a video to show you how to do the mattress stitch, I had done it all off camera. So this is a redo. I'm redoing this to show you how to do the mattress stitch. So I secured one end of my yarn, which for you will be one corner of your shoulder, and I just used a slip knot, and I left a long enough tail that I can weave that in later. Okay, so now you're going to take your edges and you're going to go from one side, from the inside to the outside, and then you go to the opposite side, going from the inside out, and you weave back and forth, just going from one side to the other, starting from the inside of your seam going out like you're sewing up a shoe. Okay, and you'll just work your way down your seam, and we are going to pretend that we got to the end, and then you will just secure the end. I'm not going to do mine real tight because I'm going to have to take this out. Okay, and then cut a long enough tail that you can weave it in also. Okay, so that's how you do the mattress stitch, and this is how we're going to put together the sleeves and the sides. Okay, so this should be what it looks like. Look at that really awesome sleeve. You can hardly even tell where I seamed it. Okay, so this is one shoulder, and here's my other shoulder, and now we're going to add our sleeves. Okay, so this is the back and this is the front. And I did kind of mention this before. With the front panels and the back panels, we normally, the first row that you crochet is going to be the bottom. But on these, it's the top, okay? Which is why our tails were up here on top. Normally, with patterns, your tails or where you begin is on the bottom, but this is opposite. I did it differently. Okay, so I have marked the middle of my sleeve, okay, and we're gonna line up the middle of the sleeve with the seam that you just made for the shoulders, okay? And because this single crochet ribbing is kind of stretchy, I would suggest that you count the number of rows and just make sure that, let me get in the middle here, that where you start and where you stop for your sleeve is the same on your back and front panels. okay? You don't want to end up doing it like this or like this. You kind of want it right in the middle, okay? So I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, so I have the middle of my sleeve lined up with my shoulder seam, and then I don't know if you can see these little stripies. I went down 6 stripes on the back and 6 stripes on the front so that I know that I'm in the middle and I'm not gonna stretch it either way. And so for the sleeves, you should have an extra long piece of yarn already attached from where you ended the sleeve. And then again, you're just gonna do the mattress stitch all along here and then fasten off down here, and we will sew in that tail a little bit later. So now that you've got your sleeves on, the next step would be seaming up the side of the sweater. But before we do that, you're going to need to decide if you want to do pockets or not. If your length of your sweater is on the shorter side, you might not have room for pockets, or you might just like a sleeker look. The pockets don't really poke out too much, but anyway, just you decide if you want pockets or not. If you do want pockets, I will show you how to make them and attach them to the sweater before we seam up the sides. Okay, you're gonna just need to know measurement G, which is just the width of your hand, and then add an inch, and then H is from your wrist to your fingertips and add an inch, okay? And then we're gonna make basically like a mini back panel. So I'm not gonna go over again how to make a little rectangle. If you are gonna do the pockets and not quite sure how to do it, just go back and rewind how to do the back panel, and then just use these measurements, okay? So the width is gonna be measurement G, and then the length is H, okay? Just like the back panel. But what is different from the back panel is when you have gotten the size that you want, when you go to fasten off, you're going to triple 3 sides of your rectangle, okay? So here's 1, 2, 3, and we're just going to use this length to fasten the pocket onto the inside, okay? So you will just cut an extra long length and then fasten off, and then I will show you how to attach it to your front panels. Okay, let me see if I can orient you to where I am on this sweater, okay? This is the front panel, the outside of the front panel. Here's my sleeve, okay, and we haven't done the side seam yet, so I just have it held together with these stitch markers, okay? So on the front panel, the outside, well, actually it doesn't matter right now, front or inside. I just need you to find the row where you quit increasing, okay? And mark it, all right? And do that for both sides, okay? And then we're gonna work on the inside now of the front panel, okay? I've already done one side right here. This is our pocket that I have sewed around the edge of, and that's what we're fixing to do. So on this other panel, okay, this was the outside, and now I'm going to the inside, all right? And we're gonna follow the row where you stopped increasing, okay? And then that is where you're going to attach your pocket. Where did my pocket go? Okay, so this red mark is where I quit increasing on the front panel, okay? And I'm following this line over here. So this blue stitch marker is now the row where I stopped increasing on the front panel, and we're on the inside, okay? And we are now going to attach the pocket along that row, okay? So, get this whole thing in here. Okay, you're gonna need your tapestry needle, and then you're gonna need some stitch markers. I would suggest using stitch markers to kind of be your guide as to where you're going to sew. Okay, and we're gonna sew all 3 sides. This is where we're gonna put our hand in, so this doesn't get sewn onto the front panel, just these 3 sides, okay? And I'm gonna use my stripes here to kind of mark where I'm gonna attach it. Okay, so I've just put stitch markers in the 4 corners just to kind of hold it in place, and then I'm going to use these stripes to know where to sew to, okay? And when you're attaching the pocket to the front panel, don't go all the way through, okay? You're going to just work on the underneath side, and this is going to be like a whip stitch, okay? So go through one side and then come back and go through the pocket and then the front panel. Okay, and then back to the pocket and then the front panel. Okay, so this is not mattress stitch, this is a whip stitch. Okay, and like I said, make sure you don't go all the way through the front panel. Okay, and you're going to do this all the way around the 3 sides, okay, and leaving the side facing your side seam open, okay? Okay, I just went around my 3 edges. Now I'm going to just create a little knot. Well, maybe I am. Okay, and then leave enough of a tail to weave in. Okay, and now we will seam up the sides. Okay, and I will show you how you're gonna have to do something a little different where the pockets are. Okay, so we're gonna start at the bottom, okay, and work our way up to the sleeve, and you're gonna need an extra long length of yarn. Okay, so it's a pain, but like triple the length all the way down, okay? And we will start here at the bottom. Okay, as you are putting your stitch markers in, the side seam right here is our pocket, okay? And so what you're going to do is when you get to the pocket, instead of sewing the 2 sides together, you're going to sew the pocket and the back side together, okay? So I would put stitch markers in just that so that you don't sew up your pocket, you don't sew it shut. Okay, here's the corner of it. Oh. Stitch marker did not want to shut. Okay. All right, so make sure that when you're seaming, you leave your pocket open. Okay. So, you're going to get your yarn. We're going to start down here at the bottom, and you're going to secure your yarn however you want to do that. I, like on the other ones, I do like a slip knot. and just leave a long enough tail. You can weave that in. And then we do the mattress stitch all the way from the bottom here to the sleeve. Okay, these are from before and we'll weave those in later. And again, the mattress stitch, you just go from the inside to the out, and then you do the same thing on the opposite side, inside to out. And you're just going to work your way up all the way down to your sleeve wrist. And make sure that you leave your pocket open if you have one. Sorry, one other thing you might want to make sure you do is line up your stripes, okay, with your stitch markers. Just make sure your stripes match. Okay, so now you should have your side seamed. Here's the sleeve to your underarm, and then all the way down, leaving an opening for your pocket. Okay, so now we are going to do, before we put the collar on, we're going to do a row of single crochet all around the edge. So starting, this is the back panel, the outside. Here's one pocket. Here's another pocket. So this is the middle bottom of the back panel. We're gonna attach yarn, and we're gonna work a row of single crochet going along the bottom to the front panel, and then up the front panel all the way around the collar, down the other side until we get back to here, to the middle. Okay, this is approximately the middle of the back. It doesn't have to be exact. So I just pulled some yarn through, and I'm going to slip stitch, okay, chain one, and then start my row of single crochets into that first stitch. And you can do the single crochets right over top of your tail, so you don't have to weave that in. And then when you come to your side seams right here, you can crochet those in as well, so you don't have to do them at the end. So along the bottom here, it's pretty much just a stitch for a stitch. So for every stitch below, you do a single crochet, but when we start working up the sides, it won't be quite matching up. So I will explain to you how many stitches to do once we start working up the side of the front panel. Okay, so I'm coming to the corner here of the front. So this is the bottom edge, and this is the side of the front. So at the corner, I'm going to put in 2 single crochets. Okay, and then as we work up this front edge, in between each one of the stripes, these rows right here, you're going to do 3 single crochets, okay, in between each one. So you could do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, okay. So in between each one of these, you should have 3 single crochets. So as you can see, putting 2 crochets in that corner just kind of helps round it out. It doesn't pull quite so much. And also from the bottom edge to this first stripe, I have 3 stitches, okay? So here's the next 1, 2, 3, in between these 2. Okay, do that all the way. Okay, so it should be looking something like this, okay? And earlier I said to mark the corner it's not really a corner, but this is where on the front panel you quit increasing. Okay, you're still just going to continue to do that. Leave that marker there though, and you can still see the stripes right here. You're still going to do 3 single crochets up this slanted edge till you get to the neck. So now I'm to the neck edge, and just like with the bottom edge, you just put a single crochet in for every stitch. This is easier. And then as you work back down the other side, same thing. In between these rows, you put 3 single crochets until we get all the way back around to the middle of the back bottom. Okay, I'm back down to the other bottom corner. This is the bottom, this is the side. Don't forget to put 2 single crochets again in this corner. Okay, so I'm finally back around to where we started, okay? And here's the first single crochet. And so we're just gonna slip stitch in that and then fasten off. And then we'll weave that tail in at the end. Now we're going to start our collar. So let me get this set up so that you can see. So here's the edging that we just did. Okay. And you should have the 2 corners where we started or stopped increasing marked, because that's where we're going to start our collar and finish our collar. Okay, so here are those 2 spots, and mine are a stitch off, so you're just going to want to decide which one to, so that they match. Okay, just mark whichever stitch matches on both sides, so that way you know where to start the collar and where to stop it. So in addition to marking the corner where you stopped increasing, I'm also going to have you mark the corners where the shoulder and the back meet, okay? And make sure that you have the same number of stitches between this marker and this marker for both sides, okay? So the collar is going to just be ribbing, single crochet, back loop only, just like we did with the sleeves. And we're going to start on what would be the left side, and we're going to turn it so the inside is facing out. And we're going to start out with 1 single crochet, and then we're going to increase on every row till you get to the marker right here. And then you're going to stop increasing and just do ribbing to here. And then you stop in, you start decreasing and then going down this side. Okay, and I will show you how to do that. Okay, so we're going to start on the front left on the inside, and we're going to join some yarn. So just pull it through and slip stitch, tighten it down. We're going to chain 1, and then we'll start our first single crochet in that same hole. Okay, and normally with ribbing you would chain 1 and turn, but because we're going to increase every row, we're going to chain 2. Okay, and then you're going to work into the second stitch from the hook, back loop only, single crochet and single crochet. Okay, and now we are we have to join that second row back to the collar. So this is the one we just worked out of, so we advance one and slip stitch. And then to start row 3, we got to slip stitch again. Okay, and you're going to turn, and you're going to skip the 2 slip stitches and work in the back loop like you do with all ribbing. Single crochet, single crochet, and you can see how each row we're increasing. So we had 1, then we have 2, and now we're going to chain 2. That's our increase, and we turn, and again we're going to work in the back loop of the second stitch from the hook like it is a single crochet. And then continuing working down the chains in the back loop. Okay, now we have to join our 3rd row to the collar, and I'm just crocheting over top of our tail so that we don't have to weave it in later. Okay, so with ribbing, you always got to be really careful that you don't work back into the row you just worked out of. Okay, so make sure you are advancing. So you do 2 slip stitches, turn, skip the first 2 slip stitches, and then do single crochets into the back loop. And always when you get to the top, instead of just chaining 1 like you normally do with ribbing, and have to be careful not to increase or decrease, this time we are purposely increasing. So 2 chains, turn, and then work into the back loop. All the way down. And you're just going to repeat this process, increasing 1 every row until you get up to the shoulder. And then that's when we stop increasing. Okay, and then 2 slip stitches. Turn, skip your 2 slip stitches, and do the back loop again. So continue that all the way up this front left side till you get to the corner of your shoulder and the back panel. Okay, I have now reached my corner, first one, and so now I was going to show you how to stop increasing. Okay, so here's the row I just worked out of. So now I'm going to slip stitch 2, just like we normally would, and then turn, skip my first 2 slip stitches, work my way back up to the top, and this time when we get to the top, instead of 2 chains, we just do 1, and that will stop the increasing. So now every row till we get to the other corner, when you get to the top of each row, instead of 2 chains, you just do 1. Which is what you normally do on ribbing. Okay, so up to this point, we got to the top of the row, we would chain 2, but now you're only going to chain 1 and turn and work your way back down, and everything else stays the same. When you get to the bottom, slip stitch 2 and repeat until you get to the other corner, and then we will start our decreasing. Okay, so I just reached the next corner. So all of this was no increasing right here. Okay, so now I just came down a row and I did my 2 slip stitches, reached my marker that now we're going to start decreasing. I'm going to show you how to do that. So like I said, we just did 2 slip stitches, turn, and gonna work our way back up with single crochets just like we normally do. And now instead of going all the way to the top of the row, let me get there, you're gonna stop 1 stitch shy of the top. Okay, close to the top of the row now. I have 3 stitches left. So you are going to stop 1 stitch shy of the top, okay? And stop right there. And then chain 1, turn, work your way back down. And so now for every row, when you go to the top of a row, which is the opposite end of where it attaches to the sweater, you are going to stop 1 stitch short of quote unquote the top, chain 1 and turn. And that is how you're going to decrease. And you're going to decrease every row until we get back down to the right side. So everything else is the same. When you get to the quote-unquote bottom of a row, you're still going to do 2 slip stitches, turn and work your way back up to the top, and then stop 1 stitch shy, chain 1 and turn and go back down. Okay, just reached the bottom of that row, and this is the row that we were working out of. So just like we have been doing this entire time, you're going to slip stitch 2, turn, skip those 2 slip stitches, and work your way back up. Okay, I was going to show you one more time. I'm at the quote-unquote top of the row, 3 stitches left, and I'm stopping right here, 1 stitch shy of the top, chain 1, turn and repeat the process. Okay, like I said, do this every row until you reach the corner. This is the right front panel, and you're going to decrease until you reach where the corner of the right front panel where we stopped decreasing. Okay, so I've just finished going down the second side, and I actually ended up being like 1 stitch shy of the corner, which I'm not going to go back and try and fix, because this will be my inside, so it'll be like this. But if that's something that really bothers you, you can go back up here to the neck corner, and instead of starting the decrease here, you can just go one more row at just not decreasing. So instead of decreasing right here, start decreasing here. Okay, so that's one way that you can fix that if that is something that you cannot live with. I have chosen to live with that because I don't want to rip it out again. So now what we're going to do is fasten off, and then we're going to tie. We're going to weave in all of our ends, and the last thing we have to do is put on buttons, which I will show you how to do that. Okay, now we're going to weave in our tails, so you'll need a tapestry needle, and I'm going to weave in the inside, and you're just going to want to, I'm not going all the way through, and I like to kind of go back and forth over itself at least once or twice. Okay, and if you've weaved it in a couple times and you feel like it's secure and you still have a tail, just cut off the remaining. Okay, so now we're going to put on the buttons. Okay, and this is the side that I am going to have on the inside. So I'm going to put my button. Okay, so my right side is going to be the inside. So on the inside of the left side is where I'm going to put a button so that I can attach it. And you're going to put it on like this. And you can use a button with holes big enough for yarn, or you can also just use like a regular button that you use thread and needle. But either way, you want to make sure that you don't go through all the way to the other side. And you're just going to secure the button however you want to. Okay, and then I'm going to weave in the tails. And then for the side that's going to go, the front panel that's going to go on the outside, you can use another button if you want to. I'm going to weave those in later. But I am going to use, I actually bought some Shawl pins that I'm going to use on the outside. And how you know where to put the button, sorry, I didn't mention that before, right above your pockets. Okay, so that should line up with the row where you started the collar and finished it. So I've used my stripes to help me figure out the location to put the button. But it's going to be right in front of the, right on top of where you put your pocket. And then if you want to do a button for the outer cover, same thing, it's going to line up with the edge where you stopped increasing and where your shawl collar would have finished. So I just used my stripe, and here's my pocket, and then I would put a button if I'm going to use a button, but I'm going to use a shawl pin, so there's nothing I actually have to attach for that. And I will include, I bought these off of Etsy, They're really nice, and I can include like the Etsy sellers on there. Okay, so I think we have reached the end of our sweater. Putting it together. There's my inside button that this is going to attach to. Okay, and then this will be my front half. Let me see if I can lay this out a little bit better so that you can see it. And on the button positions, if you kind of want the front to snug in a little bit, then put your buttons all the way on the outside. If you want it to fit a little looser, you can put your buttons in a little bit. Okay, and then this is how I'm going to secure this side. Okay. I know I can't really fit all this in the camera, but thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy your sweater. And if anybody does make this sweater and you use different yarn, have different size, unusual sizes, I would love to hear your experiences in my comments below. And if I can help make adjustments for sizes or anything like that, please feel free to email me, which is my email is on my website, Lily Makes Stuff. But again, thank you and enjoy.